were told that freedom begins the day you quit your job, that the 9 to 5 is a prison, that employment is slavery, that having a boss means you have failed, that real winners escape, start an online business, make passive income, and never answer to anyone again. And I understand why this message works. Because for many people, work really does feel like a cage. Not because work itself is evil, but because their time is controlled by someone else. Their income depends on permission. Their energy is spent inside a system they did not design. Their best hours are traded away before they can build anything of their own. So when someone online says escape the 9 to 5, it touches something real. It touches exhaustion. It touches resentment. It touches that quiet, private fear that your life is being spent one weekday at a time. So let me be precise from the beginning. The desire to escape the 9 to 5 is not stupid. The fantasy is stupid. And there is a difference. Because the problem is not that people want freedom. The problem is that they're being sold a childish definition of freedom. A definition where freedom means no boss, no schedule, no pressure, no responsibility, no uncertainty, no discipline, no work. Which sounds beautiful for about 12 seconds. Then reality walks in, wearing extremely boring shoes, and asks the question the guru forgot to answer. Who is going to create the value? Because if there is no value, there is no wealth. There is only motion, and this is where the false map begins. The false map says employment is captivity, entrepreneurship is freedom. But the better map says dependency is captivity, value architecture is freedom. Those are not the same thing. You can have a job and be building freedom. You can run a business and be completely trapped. You can have no boss and still be owned by customers, algorithms, debt, rent, platform risk, cash flow panic, your own lack of discipline, and a beautiful little dopamine casino called checking your revenue dashboard every 6 minutes. No boss does not mean no master. Sometimes it only means the master has become invisible, and invisible masters are harder to negotiate with. So today, we're going to dismantle the 9 to 5 escape fantasy. Not because employment is sacred, it's not. Not because everyone should stay in a job forever, they should not. And not because wanting more freedom is immature, it is not. But because bad maps waste lives. And the 9 to 5 escape fantasy is a bad map. It takes a legitimate desire, the desire for agency, and turns it into a cartoon. It makes people believe the problem is the job itself. But usually the deeper problem is not the job. The deeper problem is dependency. Dependency on one employer, dependency on one paycheck, dependency on one skill, dependency on one market position, dependency on one identity, dependency on one fragile structure that can be taken away, degraded, automated, outsourced, politicized, or simply made unbearable. That is the real cage, not work, dependency. And if you do not understand that distinction, you can quit your job and carry the cage with you. You just repaint it. Maybe you put a nicer logo on it. Maybe you call it a business. Maybe you call it freedom. But structurally, nothing has changed. You're still dependent. Only now, the paycheck is less predictable. Very empowering, in theory. Let's define the thing. A 9 to 5 is not merely a schedule. It's a structure of exchange. You give time, skill, effort, availability, compliance, attention and responsibility. In return, you receive income, stability, training, reputation, access, professional pressure, sometimes status, sometimes benefits, sometimes relationship, sometimes a path to stronger future opportunities. That exchange can be unfair. It can also be useful. Employment is not automatically a trap. Employment can be a resource engine, especially if you use it consciously. It can give you money, it can give you skills, it can give you knowledge of an industry, it can give you discipline, it can give you access to people. It can give you proof that you can operate under pressure. It can give you the runway to build something outside it. The problem begins when employment becomes your entire wealth architecture, when your only income is your salary, your only value channel is your employer, your only professional identity is your job title, your only financial strategy is keep earning and hope nothing breaks, your only plan is loyalty to a system that may not be loyal back. That is not security, that is concentrated dependency. And concentrated dependency is fragile. This is why the escape fantasy is so seductive. People sense correctly that income alone is not wealth. They sense that a paycheck is not the same thing as freedom. They sense that asking permission for their own time is not a powerful position. They sense that something is wrong. But then the internet takes that accurate discomfort and monetizes it. Quit your job, escape the matrix, start a side hustle, build passive income, become your own boss, never trade time for money again. This is where desire gets kidnapped by a false map, because most of these messages do not teach wealth, they teach resentment, and resentment is easier to monetize than discipline. Resentment says they are stealing my life. Discipline says let me audit my resources, increase my skills, build value, capture value, reduce dependency, and construct optionality over time. One of those performs better on social media. Unfortunately, the other one builds wealth. The central lie is this: quitting your job creates freedom. It does not. Quitting your job only removes one structure. It does not automatically create a better one. That distinction matters. If you leave employment without a value-producing architecture, you have not escaped. You have jumped. And there is a difference between exit and flight. Exit is strategic. Flight is emotional. Exit happens when you have built enough external value channels, financial runway, skill leverage, market understanding, discipline, and judgment to move from one structure to a better one. Flight happens when the present structure becomes unbearable and you mistake movement for progress. And I understand the emotional appeal of flight. There is a kind of exhaustion that makes any door look like freedom. You hate the commute. You hate the meetings. You hate the corporate language. You hate pretending to care about quarterly alignment synergies, or whatever phrase the managerial priesthood is using this month. You feel your mind shrinking. You feel your ambition becoming domesticated, so you start dreaming of escape. There is nothing wrong with dreaming. The problem is when the dream becomes a substitute for architecture, because the market does not pay you for your desire to be free. The market pays for value. That is the clean, brutal, morally neutral truth. Your boss may pay you for time. The market does not. The market pays for problems solved, desires satisfied, fears reduced, status improved, convenience created, pain removed, trust earned, attention captured, or systems built. So when you say, I want to escape the 9 to 5, the better question is not how do I quit. The better question is what value can I create, deliver, capture, and eventually own outside my current employment. That is the pivot. That is where fantasy becomes strategy. Most people want the emotional reward of entrepreneurship without the structural burden of entrepreneurship. Want autonomy, upside, status, identity, and freedom, but they do not want customer acquisition. They do not want sales. They do not want distribution. They do not want failed offers. They do not want operational problems. They do not want refunds. They do not want taxes. They do not want uncertainty. They do not want months where effort and money do not move together. They want to stop having a boss, but they do not want to become responsible for value. And that is not entrepreneurship. That is employment resentment wearing a hoodie. The internet made this worse because it turned freedom into an aesthetic. The laptop on the beach, the clean apartment, the morning routine, the revenue screenshot, the vague post about building in silence usually posted very loudly, the claim that someone went from broke to 7 figures in 11 months using one simple system they are generously willing to teach you for only no, stop. The details change. The pattern is always the same. They sell the emotional image of freedom while hiding the operational machinery underneath it. And the machinery is where the truth lives. Because real freedom is not an image. Real freedom is control over resources. That is what Values King means by wealth architecture. Not a vibe, not a bank screenshot, not a rented symbol of success. Wealth architecture means you have organized resources in a way that increases your agency, resilience, security, optionality, and long-term power over your life. Resources include money, yes, but also time, attention, energy, health, knowledge, skills, reputation, trust, relationships, audience, distribution, systems, tools, capital, intellectual property, ownership, and judgment. If you quit your job and lose income, structure, network, training, credibility, and runway before replacing them with stronger resources, you may not have become freer. You may have weakened your architecture. This is why the anti-9 to 5 narrative is too crude. It attacks employment as if employment is the enemy. Employment is not the enemy. Dependency is the enemy. A job can be a trap. A job can also be a tool. A business can be freedom. A business can also be a trap with worse hours, higher anxiety, no guaranteed paycheck, and the constant awareness that every problem somehow has your name written on it. A side hustle can become an asset. A side hustle can also become a second job with uglier branding. Investing can build wealth. Investing can also become gambling with better vocabulary. Passive income can exist, but passive income begins active, always. Someone has to build the system. Someone has to create the asset. Someone has has to earn the capital. Someone has to take the risk. Someone has to make the judgment. Someone has to manage the thing before the thing can produce without constant labor. Passive income is not income without work. It's income from work that has been embodied into an asset, a system, or ownership structure. That is very different and much less sexy, which is how you know it is probably closer to the truth. So the correct way to think about escaping the 9 to 5 is not as a dramatic event. It's a transition in resource architecture. The immature version says, I need to quit. The mature version says, I need to reduce single point dependency. That is the first principle. If all your money comes from one employer, you have single point dependency. All your clients come from one platform, you have single point dependency. If your entire business depends on your personal labor every day, you have single point dependency. If your income disappears the moment you stop performing, you do not own an asset. You own a demanding job with a custom logo. This is why be your own boss is often meaningless. The question is not whether you are your own boss. The question is whether you own value-producing architecture. Because freedom does not come from having no boss. Freedom comes from having more than one path, more than one income channel, more than one skill, more than one relationship to the market, more than one way to create value, more than one option when conditions change. Optionality is a form of wealth, and many people who fantasize about quitting are not really craving entrepreneurship. They're craving optionality. They want to know they can leave. They want to know they are not helpless. They want to know that if the company becomes toxic, if the boss becomes unbearable, if the market shifts, if life changes, they are not trapped inside one fragile corridor. That is a serious desire. And the answer is not fantasy. The answer is building. So here is the better map. First, stop using hatred of your job as a plan. Hatred can reveal a problem, it cannot build a system. Resentment can tell you something in your life architecture is wrong. But resentment is a terrible architect. It exaggerates, it simplifies, it hides trade-offs, it makes you underestimate what you have and overestimate what the fantasy contains. So use resentment as a signal, not as a steering wheel. Ask a more precise question. What exactly do I want to escape? Is it the schedule, the boss, the industry, the low income, the lack of autonomy, the feeling of replaceability, the commute, the boredom, the politics, the humiliation of being managed by people you do not respect, the sense that your abilities are being wasted? Be precise, because different cages require different keys. If the problem is low income, quitting may make it worse. If the problem is lack of skill growth, the answer may be a better job, not no job. If the problem is dependence on one income source, the answer is additional value channels. If the problem is a toxic environment, leaving may be urgent. If the problem is boredom, entrepreneurship may not save you, because entrepreneurship contains boredom too. A lot of it. Very expensive boredom. Second, audit your resources. This is where the guru audience starts falling asleep. Good, let them sleep. We are trying to build wealth, not applause. How much money do you have? How much runway? How much debt? How many hours per week can you reliably allocate? What skills do you have that the market already values? Skills do you need to develop? What relationships can open doors? What reputation do you have? What audience, if any, do you control? What tools do you possess? What knowledge do you have that others need? What problems can you solve better than the average person? This is not glamorous, but it is the beginning of power, because freedom is built from reality, not from mood. Third, build external value before external identity. Not begin with I am an entrepreneur now. Begin with what problem can I solve? Identity is cheap, value is expensive, and one of the great traps of escape culture is premature identity. People adopt the identity of independence before they have built the mechanism of independence. They change their bio, post quotes, they consume business content, they buy the course, they join the community, they say my brand before they have a customer, a system, an offer, or evidence that the market cares. I'm not mocking the desire, I am warning against premature identity, because the market is not impressed by your self-concept. Market asks, what can you do for me? That question is not cruel, it is clarifying. Fourth, create a bridge, not a cliff. For most people, the intelligent path is not to quit first and build later. It is to build until quitting becomes a logical transition. Use employment as a resource engine while you build external assets. That might mean developing a skill on evenings and weekends. It might mean freelancing quietly. It might mean building an audience. It might mean creating content, learning sales, validating an offer, saving aggressively, paying down a debt, moving from a draining job to a less draining one so you can free energy for the build. This is not cowardice, this is architecture. The internet glorifies the leap because the leap is cinematic, but most real wealth is not cinematic, it is structural. Earn, learn, save, build, test, fail, improve, capture, own, repeat. Not very sexy, inconveniently effective. Fifth, understand the difference between income, assets, and ownership. Income is money coming in. An asset is something that can produce value or income beyond your immediate labor. Ownership means you control the thing that produces or captures value. A job gives you income. A freelance client gives you income. A business may give you income, but not necessarily an asset. A product, a system, intellectual property, distribution, a brand, equity, software, a repeatable process, a trained team, useful audience, a portfolio of ownership claims. These may become assets. The goal is not merely to replace salary with self-employment income. That can be useful, but it's not the whole game. A deeper goal is to move from selling to building value-producing architecture. And this transition often has stages. First, you sell labor. Then you sell skilled labor. Then you package knowledge. Then you build repeatable offers. Then you create systems, then you own assets, and then, if you are disciplined and not seduced by every shiny object on the internet, you may build real optionality. That is not the same as quit your job and become free. It is slower, it is harder, it's less flattering, which is exactly why fewer people sell it. Sixth, stop confusing discomfort with oppression. This one matters. Some workplaces really are exploitative, some bosses are abusive, some structures are dehumanizing, some people are underpaid, overmanaged, and psychologically drained. I am not defending that, but we also need adult precision. Every obligation is oppression. Not every schedule is slavery. Not every boss is a tyrant. Not every workplace frustration is evidence that you are meant to become a millionaire creator, founder, investor, philosopher, living near the ocean with perfect hair. So I respect the ambition. Work contains constraint because reality contains constraint. Entrepreneurship contains constraint too. The customer constrains you. The market constrains you. Cash flow constrains you. Competition constrains you. Your own skill level constrains you. Your nervous system constrains you. The calendar, tragically, continues to exist. Question is not how do I eliminate constraint? You cannot. The question is which constraints am I willing to accept in exchange for which kind of freedom? That is a serious question. Job may constrain your time but reduce income uncertainty. A business may increase autonomy but increase volatility. Investing may reduce labor over time but requires capital, patience, risk, and judgment. Creative work may provide meaning but demand years of invisible effort. There is no life without trade-offs. There are only better and worse trade-offs. The guru sells freedom without trade-off. Reality does not offer that product. Seventh, design your escape criteria before you are emotional. Before you quit, define conditions, not vibes, conditions. For example, I have enough runway. I have reduced high-interest debt. I have validated an offer. I know my acquisition channel. I have external income, not just external hope. I have tested my ability to work without external structure. I have a plan for what happens if revenue drops. I have people around me who will tell me the truth. Criteria may differ, but the principle is the same. Do not make a structural life decision in an emotional fog. Make it from evidence. The point is not to become timid. The point is to become dangerous in a competent way. There is a difference. A person who quits blindly is not brave. A person who builds the bridge, calculates the risk, accepts uncertainty, and moves decisively, that person is brave and much harder to destroy. Now, there is one uncomfortable truth we need to include. Some people use the 9-to-5 escape fantasy to avoid becoming excellent. They are not escaping oppression, they are escaping standards. A job exposes them to feedback, hierarchy, deadlines, performance comparisons, and accountability. So they tell themselves they are too free-spirited for employment. Or maybe they have not yet built the discipline required to be trusted by the market without supervision. Because entrepreneurship does not remove accountability, it multiplies it. If you are undisciplined with a boss, you may become catastrophic without one. If you cannot manage time with a schedule, total freedom may not save you. If you cannot finish projects when someone expects them, you may not finish projects when nobody cares. Freedom amplifies character. It does not replace it. This is why wealth requires discipline. Not motivational discipline, structural discipline. discipline. The discipline to track money, the discipline to study value, the discipline to improve skills, the discipline to sell without theatrics, the discipline to delay ego rewards, the discipline to build before signaling, the discipline to keep going when the fantasy has expired and the work remains. The fantasy says, when I'm free, I'll become disciplined. The better map says, discipline is how I become free. That reversal matters. Your current life is not merely something to escape. It may also be a training ground. Can you build skills while tired? Can you save money while tempted? Can you create value without applause? Can you study the market without being seduced by shortcuts? Can you turn frustration into structure? You cannot do it while employed. Be careful assuming you will magically do it when the guardrails disappear. Now, does this mean everyone should stay in the 9 to 5 forever? No, absolutely not. Some people are generally mismatched with employment. People have entrepreneurial temperaments. People can create far more value outside a company. Some people are suffocated by institutional structures. Some people should leave, but leaving is not the doctrine. Building is the doctrine. Value comes before money. Architecture comes before freedom. Ownership comes before optionality. Judgment comes before risk. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. Do not escape from work. Escape from dependency. Because work is not the enemy. Meaningless work is a problem. Underpaid work is a problem. Exploitative work is a problem. Dependency is a problem. But work itself is the process by which humans transform resources into value. A wealthy person does not stop working in the deepest sense. They change their relationship to work. They move from reactive labor to directed creation, from survival income to value architecture, from one paycheck to multiple resource channels, from permission to ownership, from panic to optionality. That is the real escape. And it is much more powerful than quitting a job for aesthetic reasons. So here is the value is king version of the 9 to 5 escape plan, not the fantasy version, the adult version. First, diagnose the real cage. Is it the job, the industry, the income structure, the debt, the lack of skills, the lack of courage, the lack of options, the lack of ownership? Second, protect your resources. Do not burn your income engine just to feel dramatic for 1 week. Use it. Convert salary into runway, learning, tools, reduction, and building time. Third, increase your value capacity. Learn skills that the market rewards. Sales, writing, analysis, design, coding, operations, negotiation, content, management, finance, strategy, whatever fits your path. Not because skills are magical. Those skills increase your ability to create and capture value. Fourth, build external proof, not dreams, proof. A customer, a client, an audience, a product people buy, a service people recommend, a system that survives contact with reality. Fifth, create the bridge. Reduce dependency before you remove structure. Sixth, move when evidence is strong enough, not when fear disappears. Fear may not disappear, but evidence can become strong enough that the move is rational. And seventh, keep building after the exit, because quitting is not the finish line. It is the beginning of a harder game. The most dangerous moment is when someone escapes employment and thinks they have arrived. No, you have only removed the old structure. Now you must prove that the new one can hold weight. This is where many people collapse, not because they were wrong to want freedom, but because they mistook exit for architecture. So let's retire the fantasy. The 9 to 5 is not automatically slavery. Entrepreneurship is not automatically freedom. Passive income is not magic. A side hustle is not automatically an asset. A business is not automatically wealth. A laptop near water is not a strategy. I know, tragic, but also liberating. Because once the fantasy dies, the real path becomes visible. The real path is better, not easier, better. Build value, capture value, own value-producing architecture, reduce single-point dependency, increase optionality, protect your resources, develop judgment, move from income to assets, move from assets to architecture, move from architecture to freedom. That is the path, not escape as rebellion. Escape as construction, not quitting as identity, building as sovereignty, because the goal is not to prove that you are too special for a job. The goal is to become strong enough that no single structure owns your life. That is true wealth, and that is why money is not the king. Value is.